dad had just just passed away, and um, yeah, I just quit. I remember I was driving down to harvest the grapes one morning with my partner at the time, and I was talking to my boss, and I said, "You know what, man, I'm done. I'm turning this truck around. You can harvest those grapes yourself, but I'm I've drawn the line in the sand, and I'm not going to tax myself anymore for you." And so I quit. Next 2 years of my life was just completely dedicated to planning and preparing for a 3,000-mile journey up from Mexico to Canada using wild Mustangs, which I think everyone should probably do once in their life.
Trent, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. Trent, where are you and what do you do?
I'm located in the Methow Valley in Washington State. It's right nestled up there on the Canadian border as the crow flies, about 60 miles away, and small little dead end road of a valley that for about 4 months out of the year, it's a 3 hour drive to the west side, and the rest of the time it's about a 7 hour drive to the west side, which is the way I like it. Um, yeah, small little town, about 1,500 people, I think, for the entire valley. And it's a mountain horse community here. We were miners and loggers. I wasn't born and raised here. I was born and raised on the other side of the mountains in Bellingham, but I've always liked this part of the world. And so what do? I build saddles, but I build saddles in a way that the four thoughts and focus on them is for life in the mountains. You know, we have saddles to do every imaginable thing we can do on a horse, build them slightly different. And so that's how I have my design is, and the way I do things and why I do things is because I have a specific task in mind. It can do all those other things, but really it's for the mountains is what I build it for. And I do what I do so you can do what you do, is that I build them even more specifically for the packer, for the men and women that are leading strings of mules through the mountains and are stewards of this way of life. And really not focused and driven towards trail riders or ranch workers, real, cowboys that are out roping 1,500-pound steers every day. Not saying that my saddles can't do that. It's just they're not. The idea behind them is not is that. Um, yeah, they're just lightweight, as light as possible. I don't put anything on that doesn't need to be there. And I got into doing this simply because uh, with this way of life also comes very little money, and uh, I was in need of a lightweight saddle for a long distance ride idea that I had, which was going from Mexico to Canada, and I couldn't afford to have somebody build the idea that I had in my head, and just through my nature and being able to mentally turn something two-dimensional into a three-dimensional object in my mind's eye, I figured out how to build a saddle. And so I went and I built my first one then in 2016. And been doing that ever since. If I'm not building something to go on a horse, I'm on the horse. No.
So what in an era when a person can very easily get on a plane and fly to the other side of a mountain, why are people packing mules into mountains these days?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that was actually something that was secured and promised to us by a act of Congress when the Wilderness Act was put in place. What the Wilderness Act did was it preserved huge swaths of land throughout America, uh, because we saw that it wasn't going to be what the magic of it. It wasn't going to be a wild place anymore if we continue down the path of mechanization and farming and harvesting and utilizing all the resources that we have, just being takers, basically. not levers. And so we put that in place. And what that did is it meant that not there, it outlawed any kind of motorized um, tool, equipment. It doesn't matter. Even your DeWalt drill cannot be in the wilderness because it has a motor, has an electric motor. Why did we do that? We did that because motors are not only they're incredibly loud. I don't want to hear them. I mean, I was just up at the loop yesterday skiing. While I'm sitting on a chairlift, I hear a snowmobile just screaming it off in the distance. Like, yeah, see, that's what we don't get with mules and packing. We don't hear that dirt bike. We don't hear those two-stroke motors. So it preserved what we all went back there for, which was some clarity, answers, just generally existing, just allowed to be without all those other things going on of the modern world. So we also though have huge swaths of trails, massive trail network in the country. Just in our valley alone, we have over 1,800 miles of trails. And it's hard to maintain and keep every bit of those trails open because of funding issues, staffing issues, etc. And they all have to be maintained by hand and use it's maintained with primitive skills and primitive technology. And so we can't use a motor. We need to get heavy equipment. So for instance, last summer, the big project I worked on was we rebuilt a bridge, 75-foot bridge in the backcountry. If it was 1 foot longer, it would have had to been actually engineered and helicoptered in, but we were able to make it work that I was able to get all the supplies in. So there's 8,000 pounds of lumber that has to get in there because we can't mill it or process it out or in the wilderness. It's got to be done outside. The back of a mule is the best way you're going to do that. So we have these pack strings and this way of life. As long as there's a trail and as long as there's a desire for people to get in the wilderness, the mule and the packer will always live. What form will it live? You got to be adaptive. Number one rule is, packers be flexible. Will it be the federal government that continues to do it? I can't tell you. Will it be private individuals, nonprofit groups? I don't know, but some way there will be a packer with a string of mules freighting equipment into the backcountry or just their own personal gear to go and enjoy that space. So while it seems like an archaic, dead, I've never heard, I didn't know you can do that kind of thing. It very much so is a real thing.
So you've been making saddles since 2016. Has this been your way of life for your whole life, or
Not at all. Not at all. My way of life is that is not a straight road. That one is following a lot of curiosity. Curiosity has been my guiding force in life. I didn't do very well in school. Formal education, I did go off to college and I finally, I got my fishery science degree. And when I was in college, I did really well because it was something I wanted to learn. I wanted to study. But before then, I didn't, it wasn't anything good. But yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do right away out of high school. When I was done, I remember telling my parents at a very early age that I wasn't going to go to college. And they said, that's fine. We kind of expected that. And dad just told me, he says, I don't care if you go to college or not. Just whatever you do, just do it with a purpose. And that always kind of stuck with me. Is that I really did have all the freedom in the world to do what I wanted, to create the life I wanted to create. Any kind of limitations that I was feeling at that time were self-imposed because of what the world around me was telling us we had to do. You're in high school, it's job fairs, it's career fairs, it's college fairs. It's all pushing towards this idea of the American dream, I guess. What we're all going to do. what's the norm. um but that I never agreed with, never bought into. I had a teacher of mine, English teacher, Mr. Clark, and he had this way of life that every day he'd start off the class with a 5-10 minute story. Every story was completely different. And you get to realize real quick, well, hang on a minute, how do you have this, how do you have an arsenal, a quiver of stories with so many different past experiences? And you're what, a mid 40s, early 50s man. Like, how did you do that? Well, he decided that he's going to have a rule for himself that no matter what was happening in his life and no matter how successful his job was at the time, after 5 years, he found a new job. He found a new thing to explore, new bit of information to harvest from somebody, new avenue to go down. And he just figured that life was too short to live one. So I'm going to live as many as I possibly can in this one glorious moment. And there was the other for me. It was like, wow, that tells me it's possible. Why is it possible? Because you're standing in front of me telling me your story, and you've got a wife and kids and a house. And from the outside world, all intents and purposes, it looks like you're doing the thing that you said you want to do. So okay, those are kind of the major influencers that I had. Um, and after that, I just kind of I did my thing. I went and became a ski bum for a few years. Uh, then I came back and finally went to college and got my degree. Worked in that industry for a little while, but then life took me abroad, took me over to Europe, to England for 6 years. While I was there, I didn't have a job. I was fully illegal. I couldn't legally work. And so what, I went to work in a vineyard. Guy asked me if I'd ever done that before, if I was interested, and I never done that before. So sure, let's go see what this has to offer up. That then just kind of built up and led into a pretty successful vineyard consulting company. Give me a blank field, I gave you a vineyard. That then led into a winemaking career. The winemaking career led me to making more money than I'd ever made in my entire life. But when I moved back to the US, the art and soul of that way of life in the industry that I had fallen in love with in the old world didn't exist. And that passion really quickly began to die for me because it no longer was about the craft. It was no longer about the art that I wanted to create, not because somebody was paying me to do it, but simply because I wanted to do it. Um, and I said, enough. I can't do this anymore. This is too much. This is too taxing on me. I'm not enjoying it anymore. Dad had just passed away, and um, yeah, I just quit. I remember I was driving down to harvest the grapes one morning with my partner at the time, and I was talking to my boss, and I said, you know what, man, I'm done. I'm turning this truck around. You can harvest those grapes yourself, but I'm I've drawn the line in the sand, and I'm not going to tax myself anymore for you. And so I quit. Next 2 years of my life was just completely dedicated to planning and preparing for a 3,000-mile journey up from Mexico to Canada using wild Mustangs, which I think everyone should probably do once in their life. But once I did that, and then that set in course this me down the path of becoming a saddle maker. Was at that time um, getting into packing pretty early on, um, and having different saddles. And to back up, the packing part came in when I moved to the valley here for Fish and Wildlife and was working. And it was just before I had moved to England, but it wasn't anything like serious. I hadn't really uh, envisioned where it was going to go. It was again, something new to explore and something, um, another bit of knowledge that I could put in my toolbox, take with me. But then when I decided to do the PCT, that's kind of when packing came back into mine, as I wanted to go back into it professionally. Um, but yeah, so I was planning for that trip and was needing a saddle, and I never had liked any of the saddles I had ever owned. I had owned a McClellan saddle, I had owned an Australian saddle, a slick fork Wade, a Bronx saddle. And I had various different styles and models, and they all had very specific things that they were built to do, and they were all did those very well. But what I wanted to do when I felt like a saddle needed to be was neither one of those one things. It was a combination of all of those things that I liked. So I just kind of drew it on a piece of paper, and I had gone to a saddle maker, and he told me how much it was going to be to build it. And I told him, that's more money than I have planned for this entire ride. I can't afford that. And so then that's when I started to figure out and reverse engineer, okay, how does this thing actually go together? There's a foundation underneath this thing, the tree that we all sit on, and it has to start zero. It has to start with nothing on it. And so what's the first piece that I'm going to put on this thing? And just kind of built it up from there. A lot of trial and error, a lot of tears, a lot of money wasted in leather, not wasted. That's the wrong term, but used up.
Invested in education.
Yeah, exactly. Um, to be able to get to where I'm at now. And then um, on top of that, just kind of the grace of people that knew more knowledge than me and were willing to give it up, to offer it up. And that part was the hardest, was to obtain that knowledge. It was a pretty closed off community, I felt like, as a new saddle maker wanting to come into it. And so that has led my passion and my drive into this platform that we have called social media that transcends worlds in ways that I never even imagined. Because like you were saying, you guys sell products internationally around the world. So do I. And I mean, I'm contacted and having conversations with people that I never in a million years would have ever been able to do before this platform. In a very short period of time, this platform has allowed me to get my product to the market and build up a waiting list, and that has allowed me to live the life that I do live now and be completely self-sufficient and self-employed, which is a pretty awesome and important thing for me. I just don't do well when it comes to 9 to 5 jobs. So um, yeah, but the horses and saddles, to kind of get back there, that was never part of our life. We were a motorcycle family. Dad born and raised on a Harley, and we all would get excited when we'd hear Dad start the bike up, and it was the first one to run to the hall closet and grab the little red helmet, and who was in first in line was going to get a ride. So when I was about 9 years old, we went to this little lake here, not far from where I live right now, called Alta Lake. And at the end of it, they've got your typical dude ranch with the campground there, and you can go ride the old nag or mule around the lake. And we would do that every year, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. I remember us walking down to the barn. My earliest memory, us walking down to the barn to where they kept the horses and mules and gave the spiel about how to operate your beast. And there was a guy who was pulling some shoes, trimming and getting ready to put a new set of shoes on a mule. And I had never seen that before, and I thought that was the coolest thing. I was like, holy cow, you can do that. And he described to me that, these, it's just like your fingernail grows. And so I thought that was pretty fascinating. And then getting on these animals and being that they would allow something so big, would allow something so small get on top of them. and control them. I said, there must be like some magical connection here that's happening, or like what is happening? I don't know. I have no idea. I'm 9 years old, but I want this. I know I want this in my life. Dad, can I have a horse? Nope. Here's a dirt bike. That's what we ended up getting. We grew up with animals around the property, but they were all there to eat, and I think that was a big thing with my parents is we're not eating a horse, we're not eating the mule, so we're not having one here. And life, too. We were a big time ski family, wrestling, gone every weekend, and that was just anything more than the family dog and stuff that we would eat was not in the cards. So I always just kind of dreamt of that fantasy. I got some pretty early pictures of me in elementary school with my pull-on cowboy boots and my hat, and wearing the thing, doing the part. But um, yeah, it wasn't until after high school and I got out of college that I finally had the opportunity to have horses in my life. And that was because my girlfriend at the time, she was going to move in with me, and uh, needed a job here in the valley. But she had horse experience. I said, well, I'll call some of the ranches and see if we can't get some, maybe get you a day job somewhere. And she got hired on an outfit here, and I'd finish up work with Fish and Wildlife and be at the barn in the evenings and then on the weekends. And then that just kind of morphed into going into the backcountry and leading these trips. And that first trip in, I was hooked at that point. To really get to experience life at 3 miles an hour, um, and to be out there with these animals and to have that connection, not only with the land, but be tied to it through the animals. And you begin to see it and read it differently. It's not just a thing that you're traveling through, you're actually experiencing, you're actually living with it. And I thought that was pretty magical. Like, I would like this to be more part of my life, but at that particular time, it wasn't possible. We were going in a different direction. But as soon as I got back from England, I bought my horse that I had when I was working here. I bought it from the outfit. And then it was about 5 years later is when I finally went back into commercial packing full time when I left the wine industry. So it's, yeah, not anything that historically my family's done, but it's one that it's a life that I wanted to create for myself from a very, very early age. The last person to have anything to do with horses in my family was my great great grandfather, Patrick Henry, and that was in 18 something, 1860. Marriage certificate is actually on the wall there. But yeah, so that's how that kind of all happened.
Well, I think that if you've got a life story that can be summed up in 30 seconds, then
You're
you
kind
know,
of a boring individual.
well, it's first of all, it's funny that your dad's response because a dirt bike doesn't cost you anything when you're not riding it, but
Yeah.
a horse does. I actually serendipitously live on a very, very small 10-acre horse ranch. I rent on a piece of I rent a house on a horse ranch, and I've learned a lot about how much hay costs,
Hmm.
and if you don't want to pay for hay, then there's only one other way to get it,
Yeah.
and it's not a fun job. I mean, it's a lot better than some of the other jobs that come along with maintaining livestock, but it's hard, hard, hot work and labor to get
Hmm.
this giant balloon of hay that is going to go away.
Yeah.
You do all that work to make horse shit, basically, and uh, and it's so amazing. The gentleman that I rent from, I go talk to them in their house sometimes, and it's an older couple, and they've got all these pictures of themselves doing wagon trail rides, and I know nothing about it, of course, but I love listening to their stories, and the passion that comes along with it, and he talks about working on his wagon and how he got it and all of the sort of innovative changes that he had to make to it to make things more comfortable for him. And it's sad though because he talks about it and it's definitely gone. The whole there was a time probably a couple of decades ago or more where they had a local community of people who
Mhm.
were going on they had wagons and they went on trail rides out in the middle of nowhere. They'd go all over the country and do that. And there's basically none left at this point, and he's only got a few horses. And
Mhm.
it's a little sad, but at the same time, when you learn how much has to go into it, it seems impossible
Yeah,
that
I
somebody's
get
got a job and does that.
yeah, I get on the trail constantly. You get hikers saying that, oh, that's the easy way, or oh, how can I sign up for that way? It looks a lot easier. Um, to which I like to reply with, looks like you're wearing comfortable shoes. But the thing that they have no idea about is you might think this looks easy because they're so-called, carrying the load. However, each one of them is a 1,500-pound toddler that I'm taking into the back country, and we're going to go live this life back here and all get along and everything's going to go just fine. Um, I've got each animal has 4 feet that I have to worry about. You just have your two. Where are you going to lay down? Those are your concerns, right? I've got to look after their feed. I got to look after their water. Where I decide to camp for the night, that's not just a pretty scenery or a pretty spot for a sunrise. Like I have to have their needs met first before I can even begin to think about mine. Oh, and by the way, I've been up since 3 o'clock this morning to make this conversation happen right now. And it's noon. So, who's doing it easier? I would argue that, and it's the work that is behind that gets us to that point. And to get us even to that point, even to get to 3 o'clock in the morning, the hours in the saddle and the round pen in the arena, working with these horses and getting a good handle on them so that they have a good mind to be able to lead these strings of mules. I mean, that's a whole nother deal that we do. I'm normally in the saddle right now, um, here in the mornings before I go down to the saddle shop, working with my own animals so that when I get on them, we still have that connection. We have a conversation going. So no, it's not easy. No, um, it's not cheap. Yeah, it takes a lot of work to get there, but it's worth it. Uh, not saying that hiking doesn't take work. It's a different kind of work, but it's work nonetheless. But yeah, there's a lot of money, a lot of time. You can make it as hard as you want. You can make it as easy as you want, really, when it comes down to it. A lot of the problem that I find with horses, and when people refer to the cost, is we're doing a lot of projecting onto the animal. We think they need this, we think they need that, we think we have to do this. There's a lot of I thinks versus just shut up and observe, watch, look at the animal in the wild, look at their behavior, and then go home and mimic that. And you're going to have a much happier animal. A lot of our problems and issues that we do have with our animals, 99% of them are human caused. It's because we're giving them what we think that they want, not what they actually need. And it applies too with humans. We do that a lot. We invest a lot of time and energy and money on trying to do what we think people want, not what they actually need. So, I'm pretty fortunate where I live here in the valley and in this particular part of the world is that we do have a fair bit of grass, a fair bit of pasture, irrigated pastures that allows us to free graze throughout the summer months, and then on into the fall. So we're not having to feed as much hay, but come winter, we're buried in snow, and we got to feed them all the hay. But and then building my own tack on top of that keeps the cost down too. But, Yeah, I don't know. It's sad. You get changing of guards that happen, and the biggest concern I have is uh, is there going to be the next generation to take up the torch? I would say yes. To what degree and level, I don't know. Um, Again, through the social media, through Instagram, we're able to tell the story of the vaquero, of the packer, of the horseman, um, in a way that people wouldn't have any idea. And it's the same way with the wilderness, and any kind of laws that go to the wilderness, that they don't see it, if they don't know it's there, they're not going to make, we're not going to vote, or we're not going to allocate money towards that to preserve it. So the same way, it's kind of like with this relative fame that I've established, if I don't put that out there, if I don't tell that story, I'm contributing to it dying. I mean, that's all we are. We're a series of stories. We're just everything is a story. This coffee mug is a story. So it's our job to tell those stories so that they can continue to live. And um, yeah.
Well, it's you touch upon a couple of like I think very poignant and profound ideas. One of them is the juxtaposition between um the quote unquote 9 to 5
Mm-hmm.
and getting up 3 o'clock in the morning and doing manual labor.
Mm-hmm.
And I am also a person who simply cannot stay at a job if it's I've quit a lot of jobs in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this it's such a strange phenomenon in the human spirit that we just desire a certain degree of control over our fate, whether that fate is good or bad, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, and certainly it will almost always be unknown if we're going to take it into our hands. We want to have something in our heart yearns for that to be
Mm-hmm.
able to steer our own ship to a certain degree. But we live in a world where there are a lot of rewards for um, there are a lot of rewards for following a large organization and
Mm-hmm.
having that security paycheck every month, following a pre laid out plan, knowing, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start the mortgage, and then I'm going to look at, what's my future in this organization or the skill set I'm developing in my industry. And there are a lot of times when I am very, very envious of that paycheck that's I know is going to come. I know exactly how much it's going to be.
Yeah.
I don't have to be afraid if you work for a big company, you don't have to be afraid of, oh, did I do enough today to get paid? And I don't know. It's such a strange phenomenon because what makes a person make that decision to say, no, I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna go out into the storm and flap around a little bit and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Um, I don't know if it's a nature or a nurture thing. Some people. I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine, and he works for the parks department in the city, and he was legitimately curious and wondering and surprised that I wouldn't want a life that was 9 to 5. That I wouldn't want that comfort, that ease, all those things that you talked about, the predictability. Um, but the thing is like we live in an incredibly unpredictable world. We cannot predict any of it. So this is for me a 9 to 5 job. That is a complete false sense of security. I've put all of my eggs in basket in this one person or one entity or one organization's basket and said, I really am entrusting you to hold on to these and not break a single one of them. Um, and then when I go to die, I would like to have back with a few more and feel like I've been valued and cared for. But we live in a capitalist society. We live in a capitalist world. We always have. We always will be. Somebody always wants something more, or we want what the other person has. So in that kind of a world, um, the artist, the craftsman, the creative mind individual dies. We can't exist. But we're only going to be in that world as long as as long as it takes for us to realize that what it's doing to us. But you know, we're told that yeah, we have to go and do those things, and it works really well for some people, and we have to have those people. It doesn't mean that they're any less of an individual just because I create something with my hands um, that has value to somebody else. You know that the art comes from the function. That doesn't make me really much more valuable and mysterious than somebody that's working at a desk job at Microsoft. They're all roles that we're playing in this whole human experience. But is it the right role for you? Is that what is really giving you satisfaction? If it's not, then don't do it. Don't go do that thing. But go do something. You can't just sit there and think that something's going to happen for you because you're thinking about it. You know, a goal is just a dream unless you put action to it. You have to put the action to it. So, in my friend's scenario, in his case, yeah, he's totally stoked. He loves going to work every day. He knows exactly what his week is going to be, um, right down to the minute. How long it's going to. He was asking me to break down what my day was, so that in his mind he can put it in these Excel spreadsheet and make sense of it. But it's such a fluid thing, and so yeah, here I am living the life that I live, and he just can't quite wrap his brain around that, but um, that's okay. He doesn't have to. In the same way, I don't have to fully wrap my brain around why anybody would want to go live in a city and work for the parks. Uh, yeah, so I think the big thing we tend to do is demonize that, and so then we're adding demonizing the 9 to 5. Like I personally cannot do it. Is it a bad thing? Absolutely not. But if we say that it is a bad thing for anybody, then we're putting a negative value to it, and then that might add some pressure to the person that is actually in that way of life, thinking, "Well, what do I do now? I'm confused because I don't feel like I can go do that thing that you're doing, and I know I don't want to be doing this." And everybody else around me is telling me that this is a bad thing, that this is 9 to 5 jobs. You're hopeless. Fuck it. Okay. I'm hopeless. Like it's kind of a miracle actually that anybody gets out of it.
No, certainly I would I'd reiterate that. I mean, if somebody came to me, it would really depend on the day of the week of whether I tell them to quit their 9 to 5 job. You know, there are absolutely times when we have no idea what's going to happen. We
Yeah.
don't some major catastrophe happens and there's no just showing up to work the next day ain't gonna fix it. You know,
Yeah.
like there's a problem has got to be solved. The answer must come from within us. We don't know what it is. We don't know. We've tried everything. And there are a lot of days like that where I think, damn, I wish I was just going somewhere and had a list of things to do and I did them and I went home and I didn't have to think about all this. And that's not that's the sincere sensation. I absolutely feel that way and have over the years is of doing what we do. Um, and it's kind of like it's the human heart is yearning at all times. I mean, that's part of the human experience is that we can see ourselves in our lives and we can want and hope and dream and you're gonna have some aspiration for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not I don't know if there's necessarily a right and wrong to it. the question is do you have the courage to listen to that
Hmm.
aspiration? Do you have the courage to really sit down and think what if and to keep thinking what if
Hmm.
and to let that what if sustain you in difficult times? And there's definitely an aspect of that that the entrepreneurial spirit has to thrive on because there's certainly it will not have much else to thrive on in certain
Yeah.
difficult situations.
Yeah. No, I agree. We thrive on that. For me, like I said earlier, that curiosity that I thrive on. That curiosity of what if. It's I mean, that's how play has been described. The form of play, the act of play itself is a total disregard to all parameters of rules. It's curiosities. What if I do this? What if I do that? What will happen? Um, and that listening to your intuition, your inner voice, that go follow this path, and letting doubt, as what is it? I prefer it in a way that I have it on my altar here, like on a stamp, and it says, "Let doubt be the father of discovery." I think it's actually originally like "Let doubt be the father of intuition" or something along those lines. But anyway, that idea of "let doubt be the father of discovery." All those things. I was thinking about this on the way down, actually, from the mountain. The things that we put, the limitations we put in front of ourselves. We say we're going to do something, or we want to go and do something, but then we don't actually do it because we're afraid of it, or we doubt that we can do it. Those are all real emotions that do put a feeling on your body, but do they actually control your body? No, absolutely not. Do they actually control your motor functions? Absolutely not. They're just a feeling. That's all it is. And we're investing into that feeling, or we're not investing into that feeling. Like, acknowledge, yeah, cool, you're here, Paul or Steve or whatever you want to call that feeling of anxiety, of fear, or whatever. It's like, yeah, I recognize you. You're showing up. You're at the table, but you don't get to talk at this table. You're present. I know you're there, but what I want to do, what I want to for my life, and how I want to live it, which was separate from you, is over here. So I'm gonna go do those things, and you're coming along with me. So am I afraid? Absolutely. Every fucking day I wake up afraid. I don't go to on some level, I go to bed every night and lose some sort of sleep because I'm thinking about a problem. But does that stop you from doing what you want to do? Absolutely not. There's the problem and there's the solution. Marry those two together and move on. If you sit here and think about those things, then you're never going to get to anywhere. And in that particular individual, you should probably be in a 9 to 5 job. You should probably show up to work every day and be told, here you go, this is what you need to do, X, Y, and Z, and go and do that. And you're going to probably do that way better than I would ever do because my brain does not think like that. I don't travel in that sort of way. So while I might be an expert in my field over here and have a mystique and grandeur, I can never stand in that same light as you in that world. So, but yeah. So, anyways, it's moving through that fear. It's facing, turning it into the storm, turning your boat into that wave, and taking it head on. Do you have that in you, or do you not? I choose not to listen to it. And I have had a series of events in my life that have led and formed me, I think, to think this way. But yeah, I think those are the two types of people in this world. And
I've heard to on the point of looking at your emotions objectively, I've heard the analogy of that just as you may go out of your house tomorrow and if it's raining, you're not going to immediately take all of your shorts and sunglasses and throw them away because you'll never need them again.
yeah,
Nor if it's sunny outside, will you throw away your umbrella. the reality is that you go out into the world and there are conditions that you're exposed to, and you adapt to those conditions and get through them, and there'll be a new set of conditions, pleasant or unpleasant. It's a totally fluctuating, always changing living experience that you're a part of, and that's similar to what your inner world is like too. And on one day, you've maybe maybe you're just sad and you don't know why, or maybe you've experienced one of life's many, many horrors that it will deliver to you unexpectedly out of nowhere, and you feel devastated about it, and you want it to just all go away, and feel like life is a miserable experience and you don't know why you've been cast into it. But the absolute objective truth is that you will have another day
Mhm.
where you will wake up, and life will be a pleasant and beautiful experience, and that's what it is at the end. It's
Mhm.
all of those things that have come together and make a life. And the course you set through your life, a job isn't just the acquisition of resources to keep you alive. It is, in many ways, it's an expression of who you are, one way or the other.
Mhm.
Whether it's an active expression like an artisan,
Mhm.
or whether it's a passive expression of somebody who just wants to start a family and have that security, and that's what's in their heart. The answer is to be objective, to look inside of yourself and to make your choice actively. If you do that, you're going to have a lot more peace in life than the person who's unwilling to do
Mhm.
it. The person
Mhm.
who's unwilling to feel that nagging thing somewhere behind them, and they just never turn around to really look at it. That's
Mhm.
what's going to torture you in life more than making the wrong decision.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't believe there is any wrong decision. Every decision had it, you made that decision with the knowledge you had at the time. So we only call something a wrong decision because later on down the road we look back and go, "Ooh, I did not pay it out as I had thought it. That was a wrong choice." But that's also that you're making the assumption that the other choice would have been a better outcome. You have no idea. At the end of the day, you made the choice. That's the important thing.
And you're able to look back on it, which means something must have worked out.
Yeah, yeah, too. Very true. Um, yeah, that human experience, it can go one of two ways. And for me, uh, when dad, I remember dad I was in second grade and he was in his 40s, and mom and dad sat us down in the living room, me and my brothers, and they said that dad had ataxia. And at that point, I didn't know what the hell ataxia was, and they said we're not supposed to talk about it at school. Don't tell anybody. We're still figuring this out. And then for the next 18 years, I watched a man go from doing backflips in an orange ski jumpsuit with a camcorder on his shoulder at Mount Baker to being in a fucking wheelchair and not even being able to talk.
What
You know,
is I'm not familiar with
with
that
ataxia.
yeah.
Ataxia is a motor neuron disease. It's like MS with AIDS. The best way to describe it because it also attacks it's autoimmune as well. Um, and it makes you're a prisoner in your own body. Your mind and your thoughts, all of that is 100% intact, never gets affected. You're as sharp as you were when you were in 20s, right? Um, but everything else around you fails. It's kind of like driving a Dodge truck.
No, even people who own Dodges aren't going to deny that's true. But go ahead.
um, yeah, so you start to trip, you start to uh, stumble, your vision starts to go, your speech starts to slur, you start to sound like you're constantly drunk. Um, you need a cane. and then the cane isn't enough, and so then you need a walker, and then the walker's not enough, so you need a wheelchair, and so forth and so on. To the point where if a outside disease like common cold, pneumonia, whatever, hasn't killed you yet, and you're now in this wheelchair state, if you've lived this long, well, now you just kind of get to waste away in a shell, being a prisoner in your own body, watching everything else around you happen, to the point where eventually your body begins to die and shut down organ by organ, and you just kind of slip away, and that's that. It's a hereditary thing. It's what killed my grandfather and dad, and I have multiple uncles and aunts with it, and who knows, might kill me one day. I have no idea. You can get tested for it if you have the markers, but we live in a country that for whatever freaking reason we can't decide that everyone should pay their fair share, and we can all have a medical system that works for its people. Um, yeah, we live in a world that unless you worked a 9 to 5 job and you you had a very good government backed or large corporation backed medical coverage, you're kind of shit out of luck. Uh, so, because it's such a rare disease that there's not a lot of research that's being done with it. There's the National Ataxia Foundation, which is what my business is really driven, and everything that I've done with horses really has been directed towards is raising money for the foundation. So 3% of all my sales gets donated to the foundation, and it funds research projects. It helps family gets beds and wheelchairs and accessibility in life, all those sort of things. So yeah, that ataxia is just it's a thief, and it's a real fucker. You really hate it a lot, but what ataxia has done has also forced me to ask plenty of myself every day, um, because tomorrow is not guaranteed. 5 minutes from now is not guaranteed. Only this moment that I'm existing in right now is the only thing that is a guarantee in this world. Uh, and so with that line of thinking, that to be joyful for the fact that I woke up this morning, because I don't know how many millions of people die every single day of natural causes. Later on today we can check our watch and we're still alive, and we can be joyful about that. We can be, that's the only thing that we can really do. And so if I'm going to be joyful about that too, I'm also going to be everything else around my life that I bring into it. I want it to be the same, because I get one shot at this thing, and halfway through that, somebody could come along and pull the rug out and say, "Nope, this dance party's over. Like you're sitting down for the rest of us." So when I get to that point, or if I get to that point, or if that point never even happens, and I die an old man that has a laundry list of stories to go with it, either way, whatever form it is, I want to be completely used up. I want to be done. I want to be burnt. I want to be toasted. I don't want to have. I have no regrets, and I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to continue to live my life in that way. So, yeah, ataxia has been that driving force for me. For the what would happen, the curiosity, because I know I might not have that opportunity tomorrow.
Well, based on the timeline you described, it sounds like your dad passed when you were in your mid-20s.
2014.
Okay.
So yeah, 2014 is when he passed away, February 3rd, 2014. So I just turned 30.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so there's well, I have a little bit of a similar story and a little bit of a similar mindset that's come out of it. So in 2019, my maternal grandmother was diagnosed with multiple cancers in her body. and she passed away a few months after that. But I went down. I was her primary caregiver through the
Mhm.
end of her life. I, was with her all day long, did everything that her body couldn't do for her. Then last year, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, brain cancer, basically, and it was the same thing, like out of nowhere. So went home, primary caregiver, did everything for her, did everything she couldn't do for herself until the day that she died. And I favor both of them. I don't, I'm not gonna do a DNA test or anything, but I look a lot like both of them.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of cancer in my family also. And thank God that neither of them had suffered for 18 years, but um, still, it's something that's kind of there. Of there's pretty good high statistical probability that my end is going to arrive in a similar fashion. And
Yeah.
I don't have children, so it won't. Well, who's to say what would be more pleasant or unpleasant? I don't know, but that definitely weighs on me a lot. And but at the same time, I'm able to have the mindset of, well, it's going to go eventually anyway. I have nothing. I came into the world with nothing. I'm going to leave the world with nothing. I've
Mm.
got a mind that can absorb an experience that's happening in this moment, and I can get something from it, and I can choose not to get something from it, and it'll pass, and that's all going to be about the same in the end.
Yeah, I heard something the other day that it's a privilege to be able to walk. It's a privilege to be able to talk. It's a privilege to be able to run. It's a privilege to be able to work with my hands. It's a privilege to be able to create something every single day, because there are so many people that do not have that ability, whether it's medical, whether it's their life has forced them into the circumstances that they are. And so if it's a privilege for me to do that, then I should do that, pretty full heartedly for them as well as myself. um and that's one thing that I think people tend to lose sight of, is that really all of this is just one big privilege to be able to do what we do, and to have this experience, and to have this way of, this life. um because that they say time is the only thing that you really have in this world. um as far as a form of currency, if you wanted to put it on, and it's, time well spent, that sort of thing. But it's not actually a clock that's ticking away. The clock is a it's an idea that we've come up with, to measure something, and what we're measuring is we're measuring our life. It's our life that's ticking away. So do we want to waste those minutes of life on pretty mundane, boring things, or do we want to actually spend those things on things that enrich our life and create a more beautiful human experience? I want to spend that wisely. I want to spend those on those enriching things. And like I said before, am I afraid while I'm doing it? Absolutely. I just don't quit. That's the difference. So
Well, we've touched on social media in our conversation, and that's somehow social media kind of always comes to the conversation in our calls with people, but
yeah, I
that's how we've
wouldn't have,
connected with people.
yeah. I mean, we wouldn't be here having this conversation if it wasn't for that vehicle.
There are so many people, particularly young people, that they see the number on the account and
Hmm.
they think, "Oh yeah, I want that." And certainly there's money to be made from that number. There's no question of that. But the challenge is there's absolutely a genre of the professional world in which you find a path to make the number, and do whatever is you just do whatever the market of social media, the algorithm, et cetera, do whatever it's demanding, and the number will go up, and that's your lifestyle. It's almost it's like an ecosystem unto itself. And that's not what we do. We do kind of the opposite of what the algorithm tells us to do, and our number still goes up. But and I'm not putting down anybody who makes their living that way. I certainly they probably make more money than I do, and I'm if you figure that stuff out, then you've got my admiration.
Mhm.
But another way to do it is to have like a life experience that you got um not a lot of tangibles out of, perhaps, and you convey the intangible aspects of that life experience to other people through social media, and that spark in their imagination,
Mhm.
that vision of their future from that spoonful of your life experience that they've gotten. There's magic in that. There's power in that. That's core to our human experience. That's been happening since we have had the power of consciousness and the power to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
And that's a that I'm sure there are a lot of people who get a lot of benefit from your the maybe a little bit romanticized idea of the pack mules and not the some of the less romantic aspects of it. I don't know how much of that you're able to share, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a wide spectrum of people that get benefit. I mean, there's there's 112,000 people in this world that get some sort of benefit in some form from what I post out there, and what I present and give to the world as far as my thoughts. And that's the thing. Like, I originally was really against social media. I hated it. When I did my ride from Mexico to Canada, that was the only reason why I had a social media presence. Really was for that. Um, I had Facebook at the time, but like Instagram to me was like, man, why? I didn't get it. I didn't buy into it. I didn't want to invest any time into it. And during the whole ride, it was a challenge. Um, and it wasn't until a couple of years ago, actually, that I finally divorced myself of the ideas and the stigmas that I had put imposed onto it, and just saw it for what it was and accepted it for what it was. And that's a platform to tell your story. And if people want to listen to it, they'll sign up to it. If they don't, they'll move along. If they want to be a bully and just troll you, that's okay, that's what they're going to do. How much are you going to involve yourself into is only going to determine how much of a reaction they get, and is it going to become worse. So um, remove all of those things away, and it's now just this thing that I can tell my story with, and hopefully um, inspire somebody to just even to take 1% of the things that I think and say and implement them into their life. Then sweet. As I became a saddle maker and became relatively famous in that, here's this I've amassed a wealth of knowledge over the years that if I was to die tomorrow and didn't tell anybody about, it'd be completely useless. It would have been completely waste, a total waste of time, because I don't own any of it. It's all free. It's all shared. Um, and so there was, again, here's the platform that I can broadcast that out to the world, to whoever wanted to listen to it. You didn't have to, but if you wanted to, it was there. And maybe you'll take that one little tip that I gave out, a little trick that I do when I'm working with leather, and that'll make your craft that much better. In the same way, you might only have 300 followers, but that doesn't mean that you're any less of a craftsman than I am. Just because I have more followers than you doesn't necessarily mean that, right? So I might pick up something from somebody. So it's just like this really cool thing that we've created, to kind of get back to what we used to be, which was a community of storytellers. That was all of our holidays and gatherings before the advent of electricity. We got together to tell stories, and we got together to share experiences. We got together to have that communion and to have that human experience. And through the advancements of technology, we kind of removed ourselves from the larger community as a whole and went very insular and very closed off. And through technology, again, we've actually kind of come back around into a full circle and created a bigger community, even though that, yes, people are staring at their phones. People are, um, you know, their thumb is becoming the most powerful, the strongest muscle in their body. Um, that is a drawback of it for sure. But the benefit, I think, far outweighs the bad. There's always been people in this world that are going to take advantage or are not going to be addicted to something, and but does the good outweigh the bad? I think so. And that was, I had to realize that like Mr. Clark, he had masked these stories, he had masked these experiences, and I was moved by that. My life was course was kind of set using that reading, that compass reading. So if that works for me, then there might be somebody else out there that it'll work for too. So I'll play my role and tell my story. And if you want to listen to it, cool.
Well, I think the good and the bad of it comes through the intent. And if
Yeah.
Mr. Clark, his intent was to open young minds and help them grow stronger. And if your intent is to share your experience, inform your audience of the causes that are near and dear to your heart, and or to share some technical information for your craft, then that's that I do believe that output has the spirit of it that it
Yeah,
was
you got to live
created
it
in.
authentically. It's, you mentioned that there are people and organizations that are on this platform that we can um, learn and discover and utilize an algorithm to do what we need it to do and create this large number of followers. But is it authentic or is it not? Are you authentically living and telling a story? Is it not? I get asked by a lot of people for advice on the social media and how do they build their business and what are the tricks and that I used or what was the algorithm. And at the end of the day, there is an element of an algorithm, but that's really only going to maximize and work for you as long as you're being honest, you're being authentic. Um, and that part, I think some people kind of get bummed out about because they realize, oh crap, I can't just buy this thing. I have to go create and live this thing.
Well,
Um,
especially a lot of the people who are really, really interested in this are like, 20 years old. And I mean, there are a lot, I've met a lot of 20-year-olds who have a much more rich and harrowing life experience than I have had.
hmm,
But at the same time, a lot of the younger people that I've encountered on social media who may be very ambitious, who may have that entrepreneurial spirit, they often are jumping from tool to tool in terms of like some new app comes out that, oh, I can do this and I can make this. And certainly that's a necessity, I think, for no matter what you're doing, having that vigor and that curiosity and that attention to what's happening in your market. That is an absolute necessity. But the what you need to understand is that your success is going to come in time, one way or
hmm,
the other. It's going to come in time, and you have to be committed to that to the start, regardless of what your enterprise is. And in that time, your that vigor and energy that you have, you are going to spend it out in places that you had to turn around. You're going to spend it you're going to squander some resources sometimes. And what you're going to get at the end of that is the experience of having done it. And you may apply that experience directly or indirectly. You may apply it directly as you're making content and you've got nice pictures and videos and a story to tell, or indirectly that you're making fewer mistakes and you can capitalize on your energy a little bit better as a result of that. But there are very, very, very few like powerful geniuses out there that will step into from square one, will see a fairly clear path and be able to follow it with as few deviations as possible. That's almost impossibly rare. It happens, but it's very, very rare.
Mhm.
And so at the end of the day, you probably will only have that authenticity no matter what direction you started out in. At the end of the day, that's probably what's going to carry you to success if you reach it from that path that you started out on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's true.
So on a slight deviation in course, in I use my analogy of being able to fly over the mountains in an era when you can't just you can't just like stop at somebody's ranch and ask them for some water for your horse and some biscuits and beans for supper. How does one take on the notion of riding a horse halfway across a continent?
uh, by not first step one, don't listen to the people tell you that you can't do that. It's not I can't, it's how can I. But it's interesting that you use that analogy of just you swinging it into somebody's ranch and asking for some water and a biscuit. Because actually, when you give yourself to a journey like that fully and completely, that's where the magic of the human experience is really, really, really felt, because those are the exact moments that you do get to live. Where society as a norm tells you that you don't do that, or that way of life and that type of person doesn't exist anymore. They very much so do exist, because every time I came off of the Pacific Crest Trail, that was my guide. That was the trail I used the most. But if it was on fire or if it was covered in snow, which was in a large portions of it for that particular year, I had to deviate. And Rand McNally became my best friend, and here I am on Forest Service roads, and uh, just kind of linking it together. And I met some of the most magical humans in those experiences in that time. The most disappointing actual encounters with humans was in the wilderness, on that journey, where you thought I have no hope for humanity. It was in those wilderness experiences on that trail. And I think it's a kind of an unusual ecosystem that's being created around that trail, because every single person that's on that trail, they're there for a personal reason. They're not there for a greater reason, that something that's bigger than them. Really, they might be walking or hiking, for a big foundation like I did, but ultimately everybody there kind of has a selfish idea of why they're there. So yeah, I met some, came across and had some experiences. I was like, man, this sucks. I hate people. I really hate people. But then you go down into town, and then you really quickly change your perception on people, because here you are traveling down a country road with a string in tow, and something switches inside, of people. Like, here's this person that's decided to go on a path that's completely different than mine, and I have some things they can help, that can help them along their journey. So I'm going to do that, because in some way I'm now vicariously living through you on that journey. I mean, the doors that got opened up to me, and the conversations that were had, and the stories that were told, and the people that I met off of the PCT were the most impactful ones that I actually met while on the PCT. So we live in a modern world that I can't go into a feed store reliably and get the horseshoes and the nails and the grain and the feed that I need. But we still live in a very modern world where a very old way of living is very much so present if you give yourself to it, if you give yourself to the experience, and don't have any expectations that those people are going to show up. In fact, dramatically lower your expectations. Number one rule for this way. um and it's there, it's so there. You just have to go out and you have to experience it. We can tell stories all day long and make you believe that it doesn't exist, but it does exist. But in we think it doesn't because people don't talk about it. People don't get out and actually experience it. We just assume.
Had a teacher one time that said, "Be open to outcome, but not attached to it. Be open to
Mm-hmm.
outcome, but not attached to it." And man, I bet you had to be open to lots of different outcomes on that journey. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's well, let me ask you this. What do you consider to be the greatest success of your life?
I don't know yet. I have no idea. There's no measure. I can't. Um, I won't know that until after I'm dead. Yeah, I don't like giving that answer because what that does for me is it puts a measure. It makes a standard, and I don't believe there is a standard for anything. There's a way of doing things. There's a way of living, but if I say this is the greatest success of my life, then well, there's nowhere. I've now put a ceiling. I put a roof on it, so um, I'll let you know when I'm dead. That's my answer.
What's the most difficult thing you've ever done in life?
Um, Hang on a minute. I gotta get some coffee and kind of compose myself. The most challenging thing I've ever done in my life was to ride my horse from Mexico to Canada. For sure. The most difficult thing I've ever done in my life is to say goodbye to my dad and live with the knowledge that there's a certain level of things in my life that will forever be left undone. And that, yeah, that's the most difficult thing. So, uh, but that was also very powerful. It's a very um, joyous day, because he was finally set free. He finally got what he wanted. He was no longer in a wheelchair anymore. But yeah, that would be the most difficult. And I think it's not hard to understand why that would be. But yeah, difficult and challenging. I like to put them into different categories.
In you, I see somebody who has attained something that um, we all want in a certain degree, and that is some peace. You seem like a person who is at peace with himself to a large degree, and you have also attained you have also attained experience which you can apply in lots of different ways. And that is one of the tools that we have to wrestling with the unknown
Mm-hmm.
is shaping ourselves and going through lots of different experiences in life so that when that unknown difficulty arises that we don't know that answer to, we're not crushed by the fear of it
Mm-hmm.
because first of all, we've proven that we can get through something else that's very difficult, but also we've got some sort of useful thing inside of us we've got a starting point, multiple starting points maybe for how we're
Mhm,
going to mitigate it.
mhm.
And so, you've gotten a great reward, I think, from your choice of not doing the thing that probably would have a lot more money in the bank right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, the word yes is kind of one of those things. You just kind of keep saying yes to all those obstacles or things that are in front of you, and um, it is if you keep doing that, you're going to amass those skills and those stories that you can then tap into later on. That when a big problem comes in front of you, now you can reach back into your toolbox and pull out a solution for it. um, because you had a wide range of experiences. And I think that's really important that we need to expose ourselves to, whether you're actually going to be a saddle maker, for as far as the followers go. I think very few people really are going to be a saddle maker out of it, but they're all getting something from it. And they might take something that I say, a thought of mine, and apply that to their life and their experiences, so that when they do get to whatever obstacle they face, they might actually have a tool um, to use. But yeah, I think a big thing that people need to do is say yes more often than no.
Well, Trent, first of all, let me ask is how people can get a hold of you on the internet. Certainly, I'll annotate everything in the usual spots, but what's the place you want people to go to?
My website is www.thewildinus, it's all one word, .com. And then my social media tag on Instagram and Facebook is the Wild in Us. It's got those little underscores in between. um, if you want to ask a question, fire away. I'm an open book, open door. I try to dedicate um, a few hours of my day just to answering um, messages that I get. Uh, I don't like having a little number there that says there's an unanswered question out there. So if you have it, please ask away. Don't be shy. Um, and yeah, Instagram is going to be your best way to get a short little answer, or you can email me at trentpeterson@me.com for a longer question or a longer answer. But and then there's also the old fashioned phone. You can pick it up and call and have a conversation if you wanted to. But yeah, my website has my online store and all the products that I create and make. Everything that I sell are products I use every day. I don't sell anything I don't use. I don't put my name behind something I don't use. So if it's on the website, it's been murdered. It's been tried and tested. And I feel as if it's a product that I have made in my best of my ability to help you do what you do. And you can read a little bit about my story there too. But if you want a day-to-day update, hit me up on Instagram.
Well, there you have it, everybody. Trent out there turning the unknown into the known in every way that he can. Trent, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's a great story, and your experience is something that I think many, many people can draw some inspiration and motivation from. So I'm very grateful, and I know a lot of other people are also.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to convey my story to the world. So
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
take care.